Hi, I'm Takoa De Silva with Sprott Global Resource Investments, and I'm sitting down here once again with Mr. Jim Rickards, best-selling author of Currency Wars, The Death of Money, and now the new case for gold. Jim, good to see you again.
Takoa, great to be with you. Thank you.
I'm very pleased to be sitting down with you again, of course, to talk about your new book, but also to ask you about developments since the last time I had the chance to sit down with you, which was about a year ago now. Not knowing where to start exactly, I'd like to ask, over the last year, how have you observed the markets, all markets, to be changing? What is the narrative in your mind?
Well, some things are changing quite a bit. Some things haven't changed. So some of the fundamental forces are the same. Now, superficially, we've had a lot of news. You know, we've had the Brexit, we've had the unexpected rise of Donald Trump, we've had a Turkish coup, we've seen Venezuela implode. So there have been a lot of very important, very significant political and geopolitical developments, and they all can impact gold or commodities one way or the other. But certain things haven't changed, and I think these are important to focus on because they really drive the price of all commodities. And the number one thing is the struggle between deflation and inflation. And this is something actually I talked about in my first book, Currency Wars, in 2011. I made the point, because people look at the time series of price indices, and we haven't had a lot of either. They've been pretty steady at a pretty low level, you know, around 1.5%, sometimes a little hotter, sometimes a little cooler, at least in dollars. Now, actually, some of the other economies around the world, you're actually seeing deflation, you know, in Japan and Europe and elsewhere. But that is because the world is in a naturally deflationary state. The world wants to deflate. Why is that? Demographics. You not just have a slowdown in growth, globally you do, but certain countries you actually have declining populations. Population in Japan is declining. Population of Russia is declining. Population of China has leveled off, may start to decline. The only reason the U.S. doesn't have negative population growth is because of immigration. The actual birth rate of Americans ex-immigration is sort of flatlining, but we do have some population growth because of immigration, but that just means it's coming from somewhere else. So, and then debt and deleveraging. People talk about helicopter money. We'll just give people money and they'll go spend it. Well, they might not spend it. There are two other things you can do with it. You can save it or you can pay down debt. So just handing out money on street corners doesn't necessarily get you the velocity or the turnover of money or the spending or the GDP that you want, because people might actually, as I say, put it in the bank or pay down debt, and that is going on. So that's debt deleveraging. And the third one, of course, is technology, which is a good thing. People say there's bad deflation caused by bad policy, but there's something called good deflation. Maybe we should have another word for it. But when you know, your standard of living goes up, not because you're making more money, but because your cost of living goes down, for the same amount of money, you can have a better lifestyle because things are less expensive. And that was predominant in the United States, for example, in the late 19th century, when it was an age of invention. You had the McCormick harvester, you know, expansion of the railroads, the telegraph, the telephone, phonograph, movies. All those things came in the late 19th century, you know, maybe very early 20th century, all of which lowered costs and made people richer without more money. Just meant they could do more things that were less expensive. So debt, deleveraging, deflation, debt, deleveraging, demographics, and technology are causing deflation. Now I call that the natural state of the world. However, central banks cannot have deflation. They cannot allow it. And I have this debate with our friend Harry Dent and Gary Schilling and others, because they do the deflation analysis I just went through, and I agree with them on that. That analysis is correct. But there's a countervailing force, which is central bank policy. Governments cannot have deflation because it increases the real value of the debt. I mean, governments are over indebted as it is. Japanese debt to GDP ratio is over 250%. All corporate debt, actually corporate, individual, and government debt in China to GDP ratio is over 300%. I mean, these are huge numbers. You know, people pick on Greece, but the rest of the world looks a lot like Greece or is getting there fast. So deflation increases the real value of debt. So if you're over indebted to begin with, the last thing you want is deflation. There are other reasons why governments don't want deflation, but they're determined to stop it. So you've got these two tectonic plates. There's the natural tectonic plate of deflation, but there's the policy plate of inflation, which is money printing, currency wars, QE, Operation Twist, all the central bank toolkit, right? negative interest rates, zero interest rates, they're pushing against each other. So it kind of looks stable from the outside, but it's dynamically unstable. It's going to snap. The question is which way will it go? Central banks could throw up their hands and it could go deeply into deflation, or central banks could pull a few more rabbits out of a hat and it could go into inflation. That kind of monetary instability is part of the case for gold. That's kind of the part of the new case for gold, as I call my book. But the point being, that hasn't changed. This has been going on for 5 years. And except that the forces keep getting stronger. The forces of debt, deflation, negative interest rates, deleveraging get stronger. The forces of money printing and policy, and I think we'll soon see world money in the form of special drawing rights or SDRs. So these forces are not only coming together, they're getting more powerful and they're going to snap. When, no one knows, but you can say that it certainly will happen. The effect will be dramatic. When it does happen, I definitely want to own gold, at least for part of my portfolio. But I do have the sense that we're getting closer to some very significant break in the system.
Yeah, and you noted that in the new case for gold, that a confrontation will take place. And using that analogy of the tectonic plates, I'm imagining maybe a twig or something in there somewhere that represents people's confidence, if a twig, if it's that fragile. And in a keynote presentation at the conference that we're at here, the Sprott Natural Resource Symposium, confidence was where you started in the presentation. Can you explain how important that is?
Sure, because the presentation I gave was gold. I call it gold, the once and future money. Well, everyone knows gold used to be money, and most people don't think of it as money today. I do personally, and that's how I analyze it, but that's not a widespread view. Most people don't think gold is a commodity. They don't think gold is money, they think it's a commodity. I disagree, I think it's money. But so gold used to be money. It's not really money today, except to a few people like me. I think it will be money in the future. So what is going to get us there? What is going to change that mindset? And I started with a definition, or question really, what is money? And I gave a lot of illustrations, feathers, clamshells, euros, gold, silver, beads, digital money, credit card, Bitcoin. And the truth is, they're all money or have been money at certain times. There were certainly times and places when feathers were money or clamshells were money. Not so much today, but that used to be true in certain societies. And people like to criticize, gold or paper dollars or Bitcoin. They say, well, it's not backed up by anything. The dollar's not backed up by anything, or Bitcoin's not backed up by anything. And I make the point that all forms of money are backed up by one thing, which is confidence. If you and I have confidence that something is money, then it's money. If you're willing to take it from me in exchange for goods and services, and you're confident that somebody else will take it from you, then it's money, and vice versa. If I have confidence in what you're giving me and I think I can spend it elsewhere, or someone else will take it from me, then it's money. So it doesn't really matter what form it takes. What does matter is that you have confidence in it. But the point I make is that confidence is based on trust, and it's very fragile, and you can't take it for granted. And when confidence or trust are lost, they can be lost very quickly, and it's very difficult to regain. And so money is actually a much more fragile construct than people realize, because confidence is psychological. It really doesn't have so much to do with how much of it you print, those are important economic concepts, but the real fundamental basis of any form of money is people's confidence in it. And one of my concerns is that central bankers take confidence for granted, think they can print as much as they want for whatever reason. I think their theories about money printing are obsolete, but leave that aside. They don't agree with that. They think there's some benefit in it. But I make the point that they're ignoring confidence, taking it for granted. And someday, sooner than later, they're going to pass through an invisible confidence boundary. And then confidence will be lost very quickly, and then then you will have your inflation all at once.
There was one slide in your presentation, Jim, that I think concerned everyone in the full standing room packed audience. And that was the slide on where you briefly addressed the war on cash, but what you envision coming at some point is the war on gold. And I'm wondering if you can talk about that as well.
Sure. Well, a lot of people have heard the expression war on cash. Governments don't like cash. It's hard for them to trace, and they they associate cash with, drug dealers, terrorists, and tax evaders, right? But there are lots of legitimate reasons to have cash, and people who have money in the bank think they can get cash whenever they want. And I make the point that, you really can't. You may think you can, but go down to a bank and ask them to give you $20,000 in cash. Let's say you've got $50,000 in your bank account, and you say, I'd like some cash, please, give me $20,000. They might ask you to come back 3 days later. They might not have that much cash. They'll definitely ask the branch manager to come over because the teller won't be able to handle the transaction. For $10,000 or more, they will file a report with the government, the currency transaction report. But even for amounts significantly less than $10,000, if they don't think you've got some cash business, like, I don't know, maybe a pizza parlor or something like that, they might file a suspicious activity report. My point is, you won't be treated like an honest American or an honest Canadian or citizen of the world. You'll be treated like a criminal. They'll do everything possible to discourage you, and you'll find that you actually can't get the cash you think you have. Plus, there are countries in the world, Sweden I think is the leading edge, that are going to all digital money. They want to get rid of money, meaning paper money or coins. The coins aren't valuable because they're not made of silver. They're made of zinc or copper alloys and so forth. They want to get rid of all paper and coin type money and go to completely digital money, so you have your debit card and your credit card and your wire transfers and your online transfers and all that, but no actual paper or coin type money. Even for the countries or monetary groups that still have paper money, they're reducing it. For example, the Eurozone, the 19 countries that make up the Euro, just got rid of the 500 euro note. Until recently, you could get a 500 euro note. There's some still in circulation, but they're going to stop making them. So the next biggest denomination will be the 200 euro note. The United States used to have a $500 bill until the late 60s, then they got rid of that. Now they have a $100 bill, but the $100 bill of the late 60s, when it was the largest denomination, is only worth 20 cents today in terms of 1960s purchasing power. So even that is kind of going away, not in terms of zeros, but in terms of what it's actually worth. So there's a full-scale war on cash. The point I'm making is that people say, how's it going? So well, it's over, the government won. Don't think you may think you can get cash, but you can't. But you can get gold. There's nothing stopping. I was in London recently. I went to a place called Sharps Pixley. It's a gold bullion dealer right on the corner of Jermyn Street and St. James, the kind of fanciest shopping district in London, one of the most attractive retail locations in the world. And you can walk in right off the street. It looks like a bank, but it's not a bank, except maybe it is a gold bank. Walk up to the teller, say, I'd like to buy 1 kilo of gold. They'll say, fine, that's $45,000, and pay with your credit card. Or I want to buy a couple of gold coins, and they'll say, fine. They won't say dollars, obviously. They'll say pounds. It's a couple thousand pounds, etc. They'll give you the gold there. If you want to store it, you can store it on site. They have safe non-bank storage. If you want to walk out the door with it, that's okay too. But it's kind of like in the 19th century in London, you could walk up to a normal bank and give them paper money, and they would give you gold, and you could walk out with it. So Sharps Pixley has reinvented that kind of bank of gold concept. There are very few barriers to owning gold. Sprott has a very good gold fund. There are other gold funds of that type around the world. You can store it yourself. You can get non-bank storage. You can don't put it in a bank. I don't recommend that, but non-bank storage is fine. So right now you can get gold. Not at a fixed price. It's not a gold standard, but at the market price. I think that governments haven't really caught on. They've spent so many decades disparaging gold, making fun of gold, ridiculing gold holders, and sort of running gold off the road, that I don't think governments are alert to the fact that gold is money, and if you make cash go away, you're actually going to elevate the value of gold to a lot of people. And so I expect that when they suddenly wake up one day and say, oh, wait a second, all these people we tried to chase out of paper money, they're going to gold, there'll be a war on gold. And my advice to people interested in gold is get it now while you still can. Like, what are you waiting for?
Jim, the last time we met, you noted that sometimes policymakers and banking officials will say things privately that they won't say publicly, right. The comfort of friends and things. Sure. Over the last year, has there been any one conversation with a banking official or policymaker that has stunned you most?
There was one recently. I was down in Washington. I was actually at the Pentagon, and we were doing a, closed door war game. And you have maybe 20 people around the table, and they're all experts in different capacities. And so you get government officials and CIA and military and think tank people and bankers and et cetera. I think they invite me down just to be annoying, because I'm trying to usually provoke people into thinking a little bit differently about things. But there was a guy there, not going to mention the name, no reason to mention the name, but very senior official in the U.S. Treasury. And I was talking about SDRs, that's special drawing rights, that's the IMF world money, and how that's coming, and that'll be the next bailout currency. The next financial crisis will be too big for the central banks to bail out. What's bigger than the central banks? So the only thing bigger than the central banks is the IMF. So the IMF will conduct the bailout using special drawing rights, using their printed money, the SDR. And that would diminish the role of the dollar. And we'll still have dollars, but they'll be like Mexican pesos. They'll be a local currency, walking around money, and very vulnerable to inflation, but not really a world reserve. Anyway, this Treasury official sitting one person away from me, there was somebody in between us, he harumphed and he said, "Don't you know that the dollar has been the global reserve currency for a long time? It is today, and it always will be." Those were his comments. And I said, I feel like I'm sitting in Whitehall in 1913, with John Bull at the just on the brink of the demise of the British Empire, listening to somebody saying, sterling is the global reserve currency, and it is today, and it always will be. And of course, immediately in 1914, there was a financial panic in the UK. The baton was passed to the dollar. That's when massive gold inflows, November 1914, was when the gold inflows went reversed. They were going from New York to London. All of a sudden, they were going from London to New York. The U.S. was a gold importer, net recipient of gold in its banking system the entire time from 1914 until 1950, and then it started going out again. So it didn't happen overnight, but you can kind of pick a date, November 1914, as the day sterling died, even though it kind of struggled on for another 30 years. But my point is, people don't see these things coming. They don't necessarily happen overnight. It could be over years or even decades. But again, once the process starts, if you don't do something about it, it'll continue. And devaluation of sterling, it's worth a small fraction of what it used to be worth. It's technically a global reserve currency, but only for a very small slice. It's only going to be about 8% of the new SDR starting October 1st. So when I heard this Treasury official say, the dollar will always be the global reserve currency, I just shook my head. I said, well, I'm not so sure about that. So that was a little different. That wasn't a case of saying something privately he wouldn't say publicly, because he probably would say it publicly if you asked him. But it is a case of saying something that is completely, in my view, kind of blind or misguided. But yeah, those conversations are interesting.
Jim, the last question that I want to ask you is, how is the average person supposed to arrange their financial affairs in this climate of war on cash, war on gold, and lots of other things? But I realize now that you write about those things regularly, and for the person watching, how can they follow your work? How can they get involved and get that advice on an ongoing basis?
Well, thank you, Tico. There's, of course, my books, Currency Wars, The Death of Money, and The New Case for Gold. I have several newsletters. One is called Strategic Intelligence, and then I have a more specialized newsletter, three of them actually: Currency Wars Alert, Intelligence Triggers, and Gold Speculator. The newest one is Rickards Gold Speculator, which I create with my collaborator, Byron King. Byron's a Harvard-trained geologist, very seasoned investment analyst, very savvy guy, and we have a promise to our readers. We don't recommend any gold mining companies where we haven't actually been to the mine. We do a lot of other things as well, normal due diligence, but we get mud on our boots and go to the mine, and we're not putting it in our newsletter unless we've met with management, been on site, obviously check the geology, feasibility studies, all the things you do, but we actually go out and visit the mines. So there's that set of newsletters. They're all from Agora Publishing, so you can go to an Agora landing page and find them pretty easily. And then finally, Twitter. I'm very active on Twitter. My account is @JamesG.Rickards, so I use my middle initial, @JamesG.Rickards. That's free. It's out there, and I put out a steady stream of commentary, and I hope people enjoy it.
Well, Mr. Jim Rickards, best-selling author, and now got the newly published The New Case for Gold. Once again, thank you for sharing your time with me.
Thank you, Tico. Great.